I'm just trying to. Alright, so we are live. I'm just trying to get the live stream link. By the way. Where's the link? How do I do this as a person? Basic info. I'm just looking for the share link.
Oh, it should be down here. It's usually,
there it is. Okay, yeah. Copy. Slack.
Did you send it to me?
I'm gonna put it on Slack real quick.
I'm gonna email it to myself.
I have a mic that I can put on him.
The wireless?
Yes.
Yeah, that works. So the live stream is gonna use the mic for the speaker?
Yes. The problem is, hopefully that works.
We need an announcement that it says at 9:15.
Right now?
So you can do it before we start.
Hey.
So can I go ahead and start sending it to
Yeah, you can start. It's live already. Oh, please tell me it's in here. No, we're not doing it.
Sorry, do you mind if I switch places with you so I can...
be able to get in there after?
It depends on when the.
Are they already here?
Okay, I'm gonna test it right now real quick.
Cool. Actually, let me test it. Settings. Can I? Oops. What do you want for the output? Audio. I hate YouTube. Yeah, I heard that.
No, you said you can play.
Oh, you said Abdul hates us, and I said, yeah, I hate you.
Okay.
Did we turn the mic up? We did?
Yeah.
Yeah? No, wait, this? Yeah, this one. It was turned, because, you know, people in the back were saying that it was loud enough. Oh, it wasn't? Yeah, we did turn it up. It's on right now? No. It's muted. The show's going to be at 9:15, so if you want to announce that before you start. Okay, you're making announcements?
Yeah.
I can make it. Go ahead and announce that, tell everyone to have a seat. Okay. Alright, Assalamualaikum. If everyone can have a seat. If everyone can get seated, we're going to get started. Everyone's not seated. Let's try this again. Will everyone please get seated so we can get started? By the way, Isha is going to be at 9:15. So it is 8:30 right now. Isha is going to be at 9:15. So with that said, we're just going to get started with dinner. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Real quick, someone who has a binder on them, I need to know the page number for section number 2. What's the page number? 50? 1-5. Okay, so those of you who have your binders, everyone should have a binder, but those of you who have your binders, page 15, page 1-5. And then you can follow along, inshallah ta'ala. So, talking about customs and culture. If everyone can have a seat, please. Okay, so I want to begin this section with a discussion. So, all right, everyone can sit down. All right, so what we want to discuss is this question right here. Is there such a thing as Muslim culture? And if so, what are its parameters? So if you were to say, yes, there is Muslim culture, there is a such thing as Muslim culture, how would we define that Muslim culture? What are its parameters? Now, the way this is going to work is I need you all to break up into groups of 5 people. So the 5 people that are in your proximity, the 5 closest people to you, distance-wise, get together. I want you all to come to a conclusion, or try to come to a conclusion. So the first thing you're going to have to say is yes or no. Is there a such thing as a Muslim culture? And if your group says yes, then define it. Tell me what that is, inshallah. So 5 people, and everyone in the room right now, everyone who's sitting here, should be in a group of 5 people. Everyone. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes, inshallah, to try and come to a conclusion. Let's do that. Okay, brothers in the back who are sitting, inshallah, you could get into a group together. Sisters. Okay, if you don't have a group, I'm going to put you in a group. Even if you don't make eye contact with me, I'm going to call you out. Brother, do you have a group? Do you have a group? No, behind you. Yes. No group? Okay. This group has 4 people. So if you join them, inshallah. Or the brothers in the back, right behind you. Right behind you. If you're just walking in, we split up into groups and you find a group of people and sit with them. You just walked in, find your group, and join them.
It doesn't happen often. Usually it's like, what did you learn when you went overseas? And just what you came back and learned. Is that what you learned from this guy?
I mean, this is the point of thing. I would say the same thing for the community. College grade.
Bismillah. So hopefully, can I get your attention? Can I get your attention? Can I get your attention? Alright, so hopefully your group came to some type of conclusion. If you didn't, that's fine as well. So if I call on your group, the first thing you're going to have to tell me is yes or no for which side. Okay? So let's start, inshallah ta'ala, with the sisters. That group back there, close to the pillar. Is that a whole group? Right there? The general direction I'm pointing at? No, behind you. Behind you. Yes. Yes, that group. Yes. Can we have one representative in the group speak for the group, inshallah? So what did you say? Yes or no? Yes? Yes, there is a Muslim culture. Is that what you said? Okay. So how would you define that culture? What are its parameters? What is that Muslim culture? Okay, can we get quiet in the room? Because the sister doesn't have a microphone, so we're going to be really quiet to hear her. Go ahead. Bismillah. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. You're going to have to speak up just a little bit. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay, interacting with others, dealing with your neighbors. What about it? Okay, so you're saying interacting with others is so Islam defines, or Islam tells us how to interact with others? Is that what you're saying? You're saying Islamic or Muslim culture tells us how to interact with others? That's what you're saying? How to dress. Okay, so my question is, Jazakallah khair, first of all, thank you so much. But my question would be, those sound like examples of cultural practices. But my question was, how would you define that culture? How would you be able to say, look, this is Muslim culture, and this is not? So for example, I don't know, if I say to you, wearing this jacket, a black jacket, is that from Muslim culture? Because you said, yes, there is a Muslim culture. How would you know? Yes or no? How would we say? Now, yeah, if you don't have an answer, that's fine as well. But if you do, I'd like to hear it. So, sorry, say that again, a little bit louder. Bismillah. We cover our awrah. What does that have to do with my jacket? What does that have to do with this black jacket? Sorry? Keeps what from being too tight? What's going on here? I'm lost. I'm completely lost. So you're mentioning, what you're talking about is possibly guidelines that Islam gives us. Right? Once again, that's an example, but it hasn't clarified. I wouldn't say that's really clarified. It's clarified some issues, but not more. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for. By the way, you don't get chocolates for like discussions. By the way, just want you to know. Sorry. Yeah, right here. Okay, sorry. First of all, yes or no? Yes. So you said yes. There is a Muslim culture. Okay. Oh, so the brother's getting wrong. Yes.
So, I think before you answer that question, you should ask yourself what culture means.
Okay.
And so, for a long time, I didn't really understand what culture meant. I just thought that's where you're from, and that's how everything is. But culture is a way of life that embraces many different facets, such as your parents, the way you interact, the things you eat, the things you do, stuff of that matter.
Okay.
And so, taking it from that perspective, Muslim culture would be anything that promote living within those boundaries, and then not.
Oh, take it one step at a time.
Right.
You said anything that the Quran and Sunnah promote, meaning what? That they encourage?
So Sunnah, in terms of whatever the Prophet said, whatever we can go is his actions, or whatever based on hadith, the way that he lived.
The way that he lived.
Right.
And what he promoted. Because there are things the Prophet did. And then there. No, we don't want to be general. That's the problem. The problem is general, right? So and this is not on you, by the way, or your group, but we want, so the purpose of the seminar is to get clarity on these issues.
Right. So, for example, the way like the dress code. So, modesty. Not being too excessive, and I know we're going to get into that later.
Okay, modesty, excessiveness,
Exactly.
covering your awrah, as the sister said, right? So that is Muslim culture.
Right, so just basically living within those boundaries and not, falling into the traps of trying to keep up with current trends that don't fit within those boundaries.
So all of that, you would say that is Muslim culture.
Most cultures, anything in terms of eating, appearance, interactions, things of that nature, all these different facets, as long as it fits within the sunnah, seal, and Quran.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to that. I mean, we're going to address that, inshallah. Sisters, yeah, right here. Mic sound. Is the mic on?
Hello. So generally speaking, the way that you define a culture, any culture, is that of a combination of norms, language, and food.
Okay. So those are three aspects of culture.
Of any type of
Of any culture.
Yeah.
You said norms,
language,
and food. Okay.
So when those are in common, held by a group of people, then that they have their own culture.
Okay.
So when it comes to Muslim culture, we have a set of...
So, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you. Yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay.
So when it comes to Muslim culture, we have a set of behavioral norms. We have some language that binds us together, like Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah, things like that. And food, not so much other than we don't eat pork, we don't drink alcohol. But with regards to the behavioral norms, they are more principled and they're not specific.
Okay. So I would say that you're probably similar to this group that previously spoke. Similar in their answers. Does anyone have a different opinion? Let's get back to the brothers. Yeah, back there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes and no.
Okay, so you said yes and no?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, you maybe if you could point the microphone. Bismillah.
It kind of depends on how you define the word culture.
Okay, so it depends on how you define culture. Okay, go ahead.
Because I was looking, like,
Google. Just Google. All right.
Yeah, there are several different definitions.
Okay. Right.
So you define, me, my ancestry, being Egyptian.
Uh-huh.
You define culture as having an affinity for this food and those things. As opposed to hamburgers, french fries, and pizza.
Okay.
And I guess in that regard, there really is no Muslim cultural food. So,
Okay.
You can't find it as having an affinity towards the Arab civilization. And I would say that's where Islam is around the line. As Muslim, I identify with the Islamic civilization. And the civilization is the previous prophets established.
Okay.
Babylonian civilization, Phoenician civilization, and the other for the Syrian civilization.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. So your answer was, well, it depends on what you mean by culture. Let's take one more group from the sisters, inshallah. Yeah, okay, right here.
We say no.
No. You said no, there is no Muslim culture. So why did you say no? What led you to say no?
We wrote it down because every place has a different culture. So Islamic culture, Islamic guidelines are different than culture.
Okay. So you differentiated between Islamic guidelines and culture. And therefore you said, no, there is no one culture that is a Muslim culture. All right. So, very good, very good. I like a lot of what I heard. I agree with most of what I heard. A lot of this issue goes back to what a few of you brought up, and that is, well, what do you mean by culture? So there's people who said, like, look, the norms in Islam, the Islamic guidelines, what Islam teaches us from behavior, and so on and so forth. I would usually reply to that and say, look, if you're talking about what Islam tells us is good and what Islam tells us is bad, and what Islam tells us, the things that Islam says we should do, the things we shouldn't do, would you call that culture or would you call that Islam? Would you call that culture or would you call that the Sharia? So, if that's what you're talking about, then from that perspective, no, there's no one culture that is a Muslim culture. There is Islam that applies to all Muslims. There's the Sharia that applies to all Muslims, regardless of where they are, regardless of what their local culture is. And that is, so in order for us to say that something was a Muslim culture, it would have to be something that every single Muslim across the world can say, this is my quote-unquote culture. And the only set of rules or principles, whatever it may be, that we can say that about is the Sharia. So, and I think, inshallah ta'ala, a lot of you would agree with that. Right? The Salam, for example, I personally would say that's not culture, that's Islam. And now we get to the second issue, and that is the issue of, look, if we're going to say something is Islamic, it's Islamically normal, Islamically good, it's Islamically preferred, then at that point, that is something that is not for anyone to define other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's cultural norms, there's what is culturally preferred and not preferred, and you know what? That changes from time to time and place to place. Islam doesn't change, but in order for us to attribute something to Islam, we would need an evidence for that. So someone says, look, you should do this. You should wear this. You should not wear that. If someone says that, you would say, look, is this your culture or is this what Islam tells us? And if it's your culture, well, that depends. I mean, that can vary, right? It can be good, it can be bad. We're going to get into in detail about that. The issue of there's good and bad in culture, and there's certain conditions we have, certain things, requirements that need to be fulfilled before we say, yeah, we can accept this cultural practice, or this cultural practice is Islamically okay or not okay. But other than that, if we're attributing it to Islam, then that's not for anyone to say, regardless of your personal preferences. Right? Regardless of what you like or don't like, what you find to be appealing or not appealing, what you find to be attractive or not, would you say this looks good to me or that doesn't look good to me? When you're talking about Islam, for the most part, that doesn't make a difference. But culturally, yes, that would make a difference. It would say, look, in my culture, or in this culture, in this group of people that I'm living amongst, well, at that point it makes a difference. So if we take a look at culture from that aspect of, culture is a set of norms that people, the majority of people, and actually the Sharia would say at least the majority. We'll get into that in more detail later. But according to the Sharia, when scholars talk about culture, they talk about an aada, right? A custom or a cultural practice. They would say it's only considered a cultural practice if more than 50% of the people either take part in it, or consider it to be normal, or consider it to be part of the culture. So if we're talking about that, then there is no conflict between culture and Islam. There's no reason for there to be conflict. And that's why if you look in history, if you go through Islamic history, you don't find a conflict between culture and Islam. You don't find people going through this problem of, look, what do I do? What do I pick? How do I decide? Or this culture is all bad, and this culture is good, and this culture is fine, and that culture is not fine. That's not Islam never had a problem with culture. Islam came upon a place, and certain edits were made, right? This goes against our Islamic morals and principles. Let's edit that out. But the default was, look, if it doesn't go against Islam, then it's culture. It's the culture of the people that we're living amongst. And as a matter of fact, not only did Islam not have a problem with it, Islam saw there to be goodness in the local culture. And that's why historically, most of the local culture was maintained. Even when people of an area would accept Islam, it's not like they would erase everything from that culture and be like, okay, now we all have to change our clothes. Now we have to cut our hair differently, and certain things there were certain Islamic guidelines, Islamic moral principles that was applied to that culture. That's why some of our scholars, they would say the relationship of culture and Islam is like a clear river of water that flows upon rocks, right? So when Islam comes to an area, then Islam flows over those rocks, and Islam is good and it's pure and it purifies and it refreshes. But you can look through the water and see the rocks that are underneath there. Islam, Islam was never meant to be have this predatory approach towards cultures. And there's reasons why that happens. There's reasons why sometimes we look at a culture and we say bad. This culture, acceptable, that culture, bad. We can talk about this when we discuss this, we can have this discussion. It's a lengthy discussion. But for example, when you find, for example, somebody who immigrates to this country, and they come from a land that is predominantly Muslim, well, they grew up in that culture, and they knew Islam only through the lens of that culture. So when they see something different, they're like, hold on, this doesn't look like Islam to me, because Islam to them looks like what it looked like back home. So they will look at this and be like, no, this is not right. This is not Islamic. Because to them, Islamic is what is found back home. And, especially when you're dealing with Western, quote-unquote, Western culture, you have to remember a lot of the places that, people talk about or view as Muslim lands or, Muslim culture, a lot of those places were colonized by Western lands, right? So, and a lot of those places, their resources were taken over, and the people were enslaved, etc., etc. So many atrocities were committed. So when someone grows up in that environment, it's I don't want to say it's easier, convenient, but that's almost what it is. It's a convenient way of looking at it. Whereas, like, look, all the practices that we saw back home and what we're familiar with, like, that's good and that's okay. But anything that is associated with, for example, the West, then that by default is bad, unless you can prove to me that it is quote-unquote Islam. And this is one of the many reasons. But that, unfortunately, is how a lot of us look at culture, right? And what we find is a disservice to the culture that we're looking amongst. Just simply the issue of people coming to Islam or people reverting to Islam. Especially if you look at African Americans. A lot of times, what they're told is, you have no culture. Your culture is the culture that you see amongst the Muslims. And the culture that you see amongst the Muslims is either Arab culture or like Desi culture. Right? Like that's it. That's the only thing that is acceptable. Like you should not have any culture of your own, right? Or like a white American or something like that. They're told that look, everything from your culture is bad. You have to change everything about yourself, and that is not correct because that is not how Islam views culture. Islam, as we said, never had a problem with culture. Yes, as I said, we don't agree with everything that happens in every culture, and the reality is every culture has good and bad. That's just way any culture you look at. There's good and there's bad. I don't care where you come from. You'll always find a culture and a people that there's good in it and there's bad in it, except Islam. We go back to what really is Islam, that's only good. And that's why that's the only thing that we can say, look, this should be done. This is legislated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And we have to be able to differentiate between the two. And as a matter of fact, not only in Islamic history, even going back to the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they didn't have a problem with culture. It wasn't an issue because they were able to distinguish between the two. They're able to look at something and be like, look, this is part of the culture, not part of Islam. Or this is important. This is extremely important because this is from Islam. This is part of the Sharia. This is what has been legislated by Allah. This is divine law. And therefore it is extremely important. And they were able to tell the difference between the two. Right? And it's that's what we need. We're living in very complicated times. We're living in complex times. We're dealing, especially living in America, we deal with a lot of different cultures. And then there's culture on its own. The reality of culture is culture develops naturally. Culture goes in a direct. Culture just develops, like it happens. No matter what I say, really, in the end of the day, no matter what any sheikh or imam or whatever, whoever says whatever, culture is going to develop on its own. People are going to make decisions about what they consider to be right, wrong, and good and bad, and so on and so forth. What's normal, what's not normal. But as Muslims, what we need to do is make sure we understand our religion, make sure we understand Islam, make sure we understand the Sharia. So as this culture is developing, that we have those guidelines. We're like, okay, this is fine, but look, this is too far, or this is not okay. However, when we say that, that's not up to our personal likes and dislikes. It's up to, we have to be speaking knowledge, we have to be speaking about what is actually in the Sharia. And as I said, look, if we look at history, we don't find a conflict going back all the way to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As a matter of fact, I want to give you an example. The hadith of the lizard. I'm sure some of you have heard this hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas. He tells us of an incident that occurred with Khalid ibn Walid and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So basically, what happened was the Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were eating together. They were invited to eat, and food was presented to them. And now, Khalid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he tells the story. He tells us of what happened. He says the food was presented, and the Prophet ﷺ was reaching forward. He's about to reach to take some of the food. And one of the women who was in the gathering, who was there present, she said, wait, first tell the Prophet ﷺ what you've given him. Like, tell him what you're about to feed him. And by the way, this was the normal practice of the companions, that when something new was presented to the Prophet ﷺ, they'd always tell him what it is. Why? Does anyone know? Why would they have to do that? Or why would they feel the need to do that? That if something new is given to the Prophet ﷺ, that they would tell him first what it is. Yeah. Yeah, but why would they need to know that? To follow the guidelines, but legislation is still coming down. Right? We're used to, okay, that's pretty correct. We're used to, legislation is complete. The religion is complete. But you have to acknowledge that at the time of Prophet wahy is still coming down. Legislation is coming down. Revelation is still coming. And so there were times the companions, something new would happen, they would say, well, we don't know. So just to make sure, they would ask Prophet, they go, look, this is what it is. In case there's something wrong with it, he would clarify sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the companions. So that was normal practice. So she says, look, tell the Prophet what you've given him. And then they tell the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it is a dab. It is lizard. Roasted. They roasted a lizard and they brought it to the Prophet. And the Prophet Khalid tells us he's reaching for the food, he hears what it is, and he pulls his hand out. And then Khalid ibn Walid is sitting next to the Prophet he says, "Haramun al-tab ya Rasulullah." He says, is the tab, the lizard, is it haram? Is it impermissible? Is it not allowed in Islam? And the Prophet says, "La." وَلَكِنَّهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ بِأَرْضِ قَوْمِي. He says, no, he says, no, meaning, no, it's not impermissible. However, it's not found in the land of my people. And I don't find a liking for it. I don't like it, basically. He says, I don't like it. He says, no, it's not haram, but I don't like it. Like, I'm not used to eating this food. It's strange to me. It's foreign. This is what Prophet is conveying here. He's saying, so I don't like it. And then Khalid ibn Walid, he goes on to say, he says, then I sat in front of the Prophet ﷺ and I chewed, he literally says, I chewed the lizard in front of the Prophet ﷺ while the Prophet ﷺ is looking at me. Now my question for you is this. Why did he have to say that? Why couldn't he have ended the hadith there? He asked Prophet, is this haram? Prophet said, no, it's not haram. Or no, it's not haram, it's not from the land of my people, I'm not used to it, I don't find a liking for it, end of hadith. And someone would say, well, he's just mentioning more stuff. He's just telling you about, and you have to remember, when a companion delivers something to us, when they tell us of an incident, they mention certain details, and if they mention something, there is a reason for it. Whether we're aware of it or not, we know what that reason is. doesn't matter. There is a reason. There are people who know. There's scholars who know. People who study that, they know. But there's always a reason. Because, let's just look at this incident. How many things have not been mentioned? What time of the day was it? Was it hot or cold? What type of clothes were they wearing? None of those details have been mentioned in this narration. Right? So the companion, he or she, they would look at the situation and they would deliver to us. And that's why the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that generation is so important. And that's why we take that generation so seriously. Because they're part of the process of how the message was delivered to us. Right? So, once again, if Khalid ibn Walid says that, he says, look, he didn't end the hadith, he didn't stop there. He goes on to say, I sat in front of him, and I was chewing it, and Rasul looking at me. Why? Why would he mention that detail? What is the significance of mentioning that detail? Bismillah. Who answered the last question? Brothers or sisters? Brothers? Or sisters? Sisters? Okay. Brothers. Let's see. Yeah, right here. He ate it, the Prophet allowed, okay? But even if he didn't say, I chewed it, I ate it, and the Prophet looking at me, we already know that it's allowed. In the previous... So look, hold on. The first point you made, if it's about the ruling, right? If it's about halal haram, is it permissible? Well, that extra detail doesn't change the ruling. The ruling's already established, right? It's once he says, Rasul says, no, it's not haram. Do we know the ruling? Yes, we know it's permissible. What is the point? What is the point of mentioning that detail? Yeah. Okay, so that's... Okay, let's not talk about sunnah for a second. I don't want to use that word because we're gonna in the next section we're gonna clarify sunnah. We're gonna define sunnah because I think that the definition of sunnah actually leads to a lot of confusion. So we need to clarify what that sunnah actually means. But the last thing which you said I liked. What did you say? Very good. So, in order to differentiate between the personal choice of the Prophet, the personal likes and dislikes of the Prophet, and the Sharia and Islam. Are you ready to catch? You do it? You're not good? Inshallah, you can try. Inshallah. The group effort? Bismillah. Alright, mashallah. Alright. So what the sister mentioned, right? In order to differentiate, look, imagine that in our time, a religious person, or your stereotypical religious person, right? As we think of stereotypical religious people. Imagine that one of them is sitting there. And then imagine that you're sitting there. And imagine that this thing happened to you. And you're, going back to the beginning of this narration, you're sitting, this religious person is sitting, or like a group of stereotypical religious people, whatever. They're sitting, and the Prophet sitting. And then this incident occurs, and the Prophet says, no. You ask Prophet, is this haram? No. He says, but I don't like it. I don't like it. And then you're like, okay, Bismillah. Start chewing on it. What will happen? People will lose it. Astaghfirullah. The Prophet said he doesn't like something, you're still going to eat it? You're going to sit right in front of the Prophet ﷺ and eat something that he doesn't like? How dare you? Aren't you following the sunnah? Don't you care about the likes and the dislikes of the Prophet ﷺ? How is this? What type of Muslim are you? But Khalid ibn Walid didn't feel that way. He understood that this has nothing to do with the Sharia. Nothing. There's no religious significance. There's no reward. There's nothing else attached to it. The Prophet said, no. Islamically, the ruling is that it's not haram. That's it, end of discussion. Even if the Prophet didn't like it, it doesn't, he was okay. And to convey that to us, and not only did the Prophet give the ruling, and then, maybe, in our time, to say, okay, even if the Prophet said it's halal, he didn't like it, so why would you eat it? Like out of your wara, out of your devotion, you would say, no, I wouldn't eat it because the Prophet didn't like it. But Khalid bin Walid, the companion of the Prophet, not only did he eat it, he told us. He mentioned it, he said, he wants future generations to know, he wants us to know, that there is a difference between the likes and dislikes, the personal habits of that time, of that culture, of any culture, and Islam. And so the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they were able to distinguish between the two. And when we are unable to distinguish between the two, well, that's when we run into problems. Now I have to tell people, like, look, oftentimes something happens or someone does something and someone else will criticize them and they'll be like, oh, you're a bad Muslim, or Muslims don't do this, or this is not, whatever. And I'm like, look, why are you bringing religion into this? Like, why are you bringing the shit? Why are you bringing God into this? It's okay for you to just not like something. Like, be confident in yourself and be like, look, I don't like it. Right? You don't have to have a religious reason. And look, I'm not judging someone's intentions. Inshallah, their intentions are good. Right? Maybe they actually do think that this has something to do with Islam. But as I said, it's okay to like to not like stuff. It's okay to look at a haircut and be like, look, I don't like that haircut. You don't have to have a religion. Look at a color, look at a style of this or that or whatever. Like, I don't like it. Or I don't want my kids to wear. I don't want my kids to do that. That's okay. You don't have, and I tell them, like, don't be insecure in who you are. Don't feel like you're going to bring Islam into every single issue and be like, well, in order for my argument to really be powerful, it's got to have some religious significance to it. Right? And so they'll drag the Sharia into something where it doesn't belong. And that, there's so many problems, speaking on behalf of Allah and His Messenger without knowledge, not conveying the message properly. We're going to have to answer to every single time that we speak about something and we say this is good Islamically, and we use different words. Sunnah is one of them, right? We'll clarify Sunnah. We'll say as a good Muslim you should do this, right? That things like that, we don't think about it. But what we're doing is we're speaking on behalf of Allah and His Messenger. And we will be questioned about that. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, someone came to him and he asked him about a matter, and Imam Malik said, La adri. He said, I don't know, Wallahu a'lam. And the man replied, he said, it's just a small matter. Like, why are you taking it so seriously? It's just a small matter. Like, just give us your opinion. Just give us what you think. Right? Imam Malik said, I don't know. He said, no, just what do you think? It's a small matter. He said, haven't you heard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the messenger of Allah, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila. We are sending down upon you a heavy, weighty word. That is the responsibility. It's like Imam Malik felt. The man who people, as I said in the khutbah today, people about him, they would say about him, he is the most knowledgeable person alive today. If he wasn't sure about something, from an Islamic perspective, he would say, I don't know. And often we have multiple stories of people getting frustrated with Imam Malik. They're like, one man traveled all the way from Sham, Syria, Palestine, Jordan, that area. He traveled all the way. That journey took a long time back then. No cars, no trains, no planes. Traveled all the way to Medina. He asked Imam Malik some questions. It says to almost half of the questions, Imam Malik said, I don't know. He said, Allah knows best, I don't know. And the man gets frustrated. He said, I've come from a people who told me that you're the most knowledgeable person on the face of this earth. What do I go back and tell them? Imam Malik says, go back to your people and tell them that Imam Malik said, I don't know. That's the lesson that he's trying to teach the people at that time. And things have just gone like bad to worse when you add the fact of like social media in our times, where everyone has an opinion about everything. Right? Like everyone has an opinion about every single thing. Like when we know, don't know, we're unsure, we've heard, rumor, this, that, whatever. Just putting things together. This person, I heard that. The most painful thing sometimes, subhanAllah, to read online is when someone says, I think that this is halal. I've heard that this is halal. This is, I don't know, but one of my teachers and mentors, Imam Sheikh Muhammad Sharif, he would often say that how many people begin a statement about Islam by saying, I don't know, but. Right? How people say, I don't know, but. And Sheikh Muhammad used to say, look, stop talking. As soon as you say, I don't know, that's it. There's nothing else that coming out of your mouth that I need to hear about this stuff. Right? If you don't know, then I don't know, buts, nothing. Like, stop. Khalas. You don't know, stay quiet. And this is something which is getting lost upon us. Right? And even matters of halal, haram, even more serious. Even more serious. And like I said, sometimes it just goes back to our own likes and dislikes. We try to find a justification for it in Islam. I'll give you one more example and we will break. Or we have to break now. We have to break. Okay. I'll give you one more example of culture at that time. After Salah, inshallah. So we'll break for Salah and we'll come back and continue. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
The projector of
Yes.
I left links That's a question for you. I totally forgot to ask you. What live stream is? No, the parents only. Oh, not care. What's on the table? You only need one person for that, but we need someone for the table. Oh, I got
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين إن الذين سبقت لهم منا الحسنى أولئك عنها مبعدون لا يسمعون حسيسها وهم فيما اشتهت أنفسهم خالدون لا يحزنهم الفزع الأكبر وتتلقاهم الملائكة هذا يومكم الذي كنتم توعدون يوم نطوي السماء كطي السجل للكتب كما بدأنا أول خلق نعيده وعدا علينا إنا كنا فاعلين ولقد كتبنا في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يرثها عبادي الصالحون إن في هذا لبلاغا لقوم عابدين وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين قل إنما يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فهل أنتم مسلمون فإن تولوا فقل آذنتكم على سواء وإن أدري أقريب أم بعيد ما توعدون إنه يعلم الجهر من القول ويعلم ما تكتمون وإن أدري لعله فتنة لكم ومتاع إلى حين قال رب احكم بالحق وربنا الرحمن المستعان على ما تصفون الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
Assalamualaikum. If you're just joining us for Isha, we are having a public seminar titled Trends, talking about culture, identity, and fashion. You're more than welcome to stay. If you really like what we talked about tonight, and you haven't registered for the seminar, you can do so outside. So.
Yes. Already. Border. What's it? Bismillah. Ready? Dude. Yeah, straight it up, bro. Straight it up. Hey, what?
No. Yeah, the Wednesday this was coming on that day. Yeah, we can.
Dude, okay. If you have more than 100 what's different register, I'm buying more tables outside. Conference. Yeah. You guys, I wanted you guys to come and see it first, you know?
Yeah. I told Brothers of Furqan, right?
Yeah,
Sheikh Shahid asked me to come. He's like, yeah, I heard you wanted to see the center.
Yeah, dude, we had to see it. How you do that combination, you know?
Yes. The announcement will be here till 10 p.m. 10 p.m. sharp in Chalco.
Do it.
Assalamu alaikum. We'll be finishing at 10 p.m. sharp, inshallah. So we won't be out too late.
Huh? Turn on. I just turned on.
Testing.
How much time? See how far we get, inshallah.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. So we left off our discussion while we were talking about the significance of culture, and we were specifically talking about how the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, importantly, the companions were able to distinguish between culture and religion, or culture and Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ, he had his culture, and then he had the Islam that he conveyed to us. And actually, not only did the companions practice their culture, the Prophet ﷺ encouraged people to practice their culture, as long as it doesn't go against Islam and our morals and principles and guidelines. And we have certain conditions for the acceptance of cultural practices. But as a whole, in general, we find that the Prophet ﷺ, and these are, by the way, tonight, I'm just presenting you two of the many evidences for this bigger, broader issue. But the Prophet ﷺ would even encourage people to practice their culture. For example, we have this narration here of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha on a particular day when one of the Ansari women was getting married. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he asked Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, he says, هَلْ كَانَ مَعَكُمْ لَهُ? He said, did you have any entertainment? And the entertainment, by the way, that was common at that time, especially amongst the Ansar, were two things during the wedding. Number one was singing, and the other was the playing of the duf. And I don't know how many people here attended the fiqh of Chillin It was a long time ago, and it was like 2012 or something. But we mentioned a specific narration in the fiqh of Chilin in which we hear about that. We mentioned in a different issue, we were talking about the duf, I believe. But, in this other narration, was mentioned Ibn Majah and Nasa'i and others, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَصْلُ مَا بَيْنَ الْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامِ الدُّفُّ وَالصَّوْتُ فِي النِّكَاحِ. He said, that which differentiates the halal from the haram is the duf, which is that hand drum, and for the details of that, check out Fiqh of Chilin, which is no longer taught, but it may come back. So the hand drum, the duf, and the sawt, meaning the voice, meaning singing. So what he is saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that which distinguishes the halal haram, meaning a halal relationship from a haram relationship, or a permissible relationship from an impermissible relationship. What distinguishes between the two is the nikah, the legal marriage contract, right? Them getting married. And how is that known at that time? Well, at least amongst the Ansar, the people of Medina, it was known by two things: the duf, like the striking of the hand drum, and also singing, right? So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. He's saying, did you have at the wedding? Was there entertainment? Was there, the duf and the singing? This happened. Why is he asking Aisha this? Because he knows that the culture of Aisha, being from Mecca, right, is that this wasn't common. They didn't celebrate their weddings like that. But the Prophet ﷺ knew that the Ansar, he said, فَإِنَّ الْأَنصَارِ يُحِبُّونَ لَهُ. He said the Ansar, they love this type of entertainment, meaning at their weddings. So he was reminding Aisha, he's saying, look, even though you're not used to it, this is not your culture, but in her culture, they celebrate the wedding in this way. So he said, was this there? Did you actually do this? Did it happen? So this is just, one incident we hear the Prophet ﷺ encouraging people to practice their culture and take part in their culture. Also, one of the other things that I wanted to cover tonight, and as part of the seminar as well, is some of the misunderstood evidences. Some of the evidences that are used to say that you as a Muslim, you cannot take part in any other culture. That you have your Muslim culture or Islamic culture, and that's it. And anything other than that is automatically bad. And some of the evidences that are used to say that, and what we're speaking about here is, quote unquote, non-Muslim culture. And what we mean by non-Muslim culture is, well, non-Muslim culture being the culture which the people who are predominantly part of that culture are not Muslim. So there's this notion that some Muslims have that if the people who belong to this culture or who identify with that culture, if it's predominantly non-Muslims, then that automatically becomes un-Islamic. That you as a Muslim, you can't identify with it, you can't take part in it, you cannot take part in their customs, and so on and so forth, right? However, and as I said, so some of the evidences that are used for that, number one, very common. The Prophet ﷺ, authentic hadith mentioned in Sunnah al-Tirmidhi, and also Muslim and others, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْإِسْلَامَ بَدَأَ غَرِيبًا وَسَيَعُودُ غَرِيبًا فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاءِ. He said, certainly Islam began as strange or something strange, and it will return to being strange. And so glad tidings be for the strangers. This hadith is authentic. But how do people interpret this? Well, some people, they look at this hadith and say, look, you as a Muslim, you're supposed to be strange. If you're amongst non-Muslims, you're supposed to be strange. You're not supposed to look like them. You're not supposed to dress like them. You're supposed to have, you can't have customs like theirs. You cannot, etc., etc. Right? Different aspects of culture. So why? Well, look here, the Prophet is praising those who are different, those who are strange. But the question is, what is meant by strangeness in this hadith? Is it looking different? Is it dressing different? Is it having different, customs? And we actually find the Prophet ﷺ himself telling us what is the meaning. In another narration mentioned in Tirmidhi and others, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Ya Rasulullah, man humul ghuraba? He was asked, who are the strangers? And there's a few different narrations, but they all give the similar meaning. And that is few amongst the many, or few Muslims amongst the many. So the meaning of this hadith and the understanding that we have of this hadith is that what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about
is numbers. First and foremost, numbers. That Islam started with very few Muslims. And that was obviously, it was a struggle, it was difficult, it was hard. And another time will come, and that's one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, that a time will come where Muslims once again will be very few in number. So those people who maintain their Islam in that time where they're few and therefore strange, glad tidings be to those people, right? Because they're able to, even though they're few amongst the many, they're able to hold on to their deen. So Qadi Iyad rahimahullah ta'ala, for example, he said the general meaning of this hadith is that Islam started with a small group of people and then it spread and it became common. However, another time will come, he says, when Muslims will be few in numbers and there will be individuals here and there, like a Muslim here, a Muslim there. All right, so speaking about numbers. Second of all, it is our aqeedah, our creed, our beliefs and morals and principles, and yes, certain guidelines. If we become strange for following Islam or certain guidelines that we have in Islam, then yes, that is included in this hadith as well. But the purpose of this hadith is not that we make an effort to be strange. The purpose of this hadith is not that we say, look, you're supposed to try to be different. You're supposed to try to if non-Muslims are doing this, you have to make sure that you become strange. Right? That is not the purpose of this hadith. As a matter of fact, we know the Prophet ﷺ and the other prophets, there is a reason that they were sent amongst the people that they were sent to, or from the people that they were sent amongst. The Prophet ﷺ, why? Well, one of the reasons our scholars talk about this is so the people would be familiar with the Prophet or the Messenger. Right? So when the Prophet ﷺ brought Islam, for example, it wasn't an outsider, it wasn't a stranger, right? It wasn't someone who they didn't know. He was an Arab amongst Arabs. He was part of the culture. They knew him. They knew all about him. They knew about his family and his lineage and so on and so forth. And so that was never the issue of, look, here's somebody coming, a foreigner coming and telling us to change the religion of our forefathers. They weren't able to say that. Right? Likewise, when we are in a society or culture, especially when we come from the angle, look, we got to give da'wah, we got to educate people about Islam and so on and so forth. Not that, look, I'm not saying don't be true to who you are. Right? If you identify with a culture that is, different than culture, that's a different matter. But as a whole, if you're born here, you're raised here, this is the culture that you used to, we don't make an effort to just for the sake of being different, to look different. Right? If that is not something that is already found in Islam. Second evidence that is often used, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَتَتَّبِعُنَّ سَنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ. He said, you will follow the ways of those who came before you, a handspan by handspan, ذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاعٍ, arm's length by arm's length. Even if they were to go into the hole of a lizard or a lizard's hole, you would follow them. Right? Authentic hadith. How is this hadith misused? Well, when people say, look, you're just following what is common in this culture, this quote unquote non-Muslim culture. Right? It's a non-Muslim culture. And look how ridiculous you are, people. Look how foolish you are. Right? Wearing those types of clothes. They're so foolish. Right? Why is it foolish to this person? Because it's not their culture. They're not used to it. Maybe they weren't raised in that culture, whatever it may be. But from their perspective, it seems different. It feels foreign. It feels foolish. And they may say to someone, look, the Prophet told us, and they'll quote it. The Prophet told us about people like you, that you're so insecure in your Islam that you're gonna follow them even in like anything that they do that is weird or strange. Even Prophet said, even if they were to go into a lizard's hole, you will follow them in a lizard's hole. Right? And that is not what this hadith means. This hadith cannot be applied in that way and say, look, everything if you do something similar to things that non-Muslims do or that are found in non-Muslim culture, this hadith applies to you. This hadith is applied to what? This hadith is applied to the bad that a non-Muslim may do. And if we were to follow them simply because we don't have enough self-confidence in our morals, in our Islam, right? We're insecure about ourselves, and we know it's bad, we know it's wrong, but we still follow them, then a person would fall under this hadith. And actually, the Prophet ﷺ, continuing on this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, قُلْنَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ الْيَهُودُ وَالنَّصَارَى. And one of the companions, he said, we said, "O Messenger of Allah, are you talking about the Jews and the Christians?" He said, "Faman." He said, "Who else?" And so once again, there's a religious aspect to it. Right? So the mistakes or the issues or where the previous nations went astray, that if we start going astray in that similar manner, yeah, then we would fall into this hadith. And as a matter of fact, we see this hadith actually, we see it now, it occurring. Like many of the ways that the previous nations went astray or deviated from the religion of God, likewise Muslims fall into the same mistake. I remember, subhanAllah, looking at Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, where we hear about the Jews, right? And oftentimes people look at Surah Al-Baqarah and it mentions the Jews and and so on and so forth, and people are like, yeah, the Jews, just like blame everything, like the Jews. See, the Jews are bad. And while the whole time, what people don't realize is everything that is being mentioned there, Muslims are doing the exact same thing. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in part of the book and disbelieve in part of the book? You're like, see, the Jews are, same thing happening in our community. Same thing happening amongst the Muslims. And it's, subhanAllah, it's almost, and I want you to try this one day. Go through Surah Al-Baqarah and read about every time you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking about Ahlul Kitab, or Allah speaking about the Yahud, the Jews, just insert Muslims in there and tell me if it's true or not, if Muslims are doing the exact same thing. Right? That is what this hadith is referring to, that the problems that they had, the mistakes they had, the incorrect beliefs that they had, or follow them in the same way. But that doesn't mean, once again, that if we do something similar to a non-Muslim, that automatically, khalas, you're following their ways. Right? Wallahu a'lam. Okay. Also, we have the famous hadith, and this hadith will come up again because it goes back to one of our principles when it comes to the way we dress. But the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever imitates a nation is from them. And how is it used? Well, I'm sure you all probably know this. You all could tell. You look at someone and you're like, look, a Muslim is dressed like a non-Muslim. A Muslim looks like a non-Muslim. I remember, subhanAllah, when beards became popular. Beards, like hipster culture and beards or whatever. There's a lot of people who had a crisis. They're like, what do we do now? Right? How do you know? Like, how do you know now? Is it Muslim guy or hipster guy or both? Like, how do you know? Like, what's going on? And people are like, no. That's why guys are supposed to wear thobes, and guys are supposed to do this, or guys you're supposed to wear a topi, like a hat or something to cover. It's like something, because now the beard's not enough. All right? And I used to say, subhanAllah, just be grateful. Just be like, alhamdulillah. Right? Alhamdulillah, they're in fashion. Like, we don't know how long this is going to last. By the way, those people are really like, we don't know. Like, fashion changes like this. It could be next year, a couple of years from now. Beards are out of fashion again. Enjoy it while it lasts. Right? Obviously, that's not the reason why we grow our beards for a fashion sense. Can a beard fulfill the Islamic requirements and be fashionable? We'll talk about it, inshallah ta'ala, in the seminar. Inshallah, we'll get into detail about the beard, inshallah. But once again, imitate. So the argument is that, look, when you imitate a non-Muslim, automatically, that is something which is impermissible, and so on. And a lot of times you'll hear people give a ruling on something, and there's no evidence found in the Sharia. There's nothing in the Quran or the Sunnah to say, look, you can't wear this or wear this clothing that way. And what people rely upon a lot of times is tashabbuh bil kuffar, right? Imitating non-Muslims. Right? That's it. That's the argument. And once again, if we understand, and we're going to get into more detail regarding this issue of exactly what is considered imitation of non-Muslims. But one of the things is imitating non-Muslims or a non-Muslim religion in something that is specific to them, and something by which they are identified, then yes, that would be impermissible. Then yes, it would fall under this category. So for example, someone were to wear a cross on their neck, right? We would say, yeah, that is tashabbuh bil kuffar. That is imitation of non-Muslims, because that is not something that, even if it becomes common in the culture to wear crosses or whatever, we wouldn't say, oh, no, now it's all of a sudden okay because it's part of the culture. No, it's a religious practice. And not only is it a religious practice, it is something specific to Christians. That's one of their defining, is something that they are defined by. Likewise, there's articles of clothing and customs and practices and so on and so forth that are specific to non-Muslims, or they're specific to their religion, or that there's some beliefs attached to it, or superstitions attached to it. Those are matters that we say, yeah, that type of imitation is impermissible. But there is, that's why scholars, when they talk about imitation, they divide into two categories, like permissible and impermissible. Permissible imitation is imitation of imitating a non-Muslim culture in something that it's not a religious practice. It doesn't have any beliefs attached to it or any superstitions, as we said. It's not something that is specific, like only and only they wear this, or dress like this, or do this custom, or whatever it may be. That would make it permissible. And as a matter of fact, even our scholars mention a third category, or underneath the second category. They say there are that type of imitation that is permissible, but also it is recommended. Recommended imitation. Recommended imitation is imitating them in something which, said, fulfills the other conditions. It's not a religious practice, and so on and so forth. But also there's goodness in it. So, for example, the church next door, they feed the homeless. And then someone in the masjid says, look, they're going out and they're feeding the homeless. We as Muslims, we're supposed to help those in need and the hungry. So we should do that as well. And then someone stands up and goes, imitating non-Muslims. We're like, no. Not only is this something which is permissible, it is something which is recommended, it's something which is good. I remember when the ALS challenge went viral. You all remember this, the ice bucket challenge? And a couple of the Maghrib instructors, they did the ALS challenge, right? And all you had to do is read through the comments. People are like, and you literally found this not this hadith, this as well, but especially the hadith of the lizard, right? That if they were enter the hole of a lizard, it's like, look how ridiculous these American scholars are, these Western scholars. Throwing ice on yourself, that's so ridiculous. Right? The Prophet ﷺ told us about these people, that they would follow the nations who came before them, even if they were to enter into a lizard's hole. Look how ridiculous they are. And many of the Maghrib, they did it because they understood that not only is this like a permissible type of imitation, this is recommended. It's good because they're taking part in something which is good, and there's goodness in it. And it's not something that is specific to a religion, a particular non-Muslim religion, or it's not something that has certain beliefs attached to it. Right? Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We're going to talk about this more, inshallah ta'ala. But the other issue that I want to cover tonight before we close is the issue of sunnah. I know one of the sisters brought up the topic of sunnah, like what is sunnah? And a lot of times there's confusion because the term sunnah is not understood completely or misunderstood. A very common debate that occurs is covering the head sunnah for men? And you'll hear people say, yes, it is sunnah. And you'll hear people say, no, it's not sunnah. And actually, they're both correct, or they can both be correct, depending on what definition we're talking about of sunnah. So, according to the scholars of hadith, sunnah is anything that is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. So, that which is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ from speech, action, tacit approval or disapproval, and physical or character traits. So, pretty much anything the Prophet ﷺ did, anything he took part in, his personal likes and dislikes, all of that, we would say that is sunnah. But that's not a legal ruling. That's not a ruling in the Sharia. For a legal ruling, we go to the scholars of fiqh. And according to them, sunnah is defined as a religious ruling, meaning it's something that is recommended and liked, something that if we take part in it, we are rewarded by Allah. There are spiritual implications to it. Right? There's spiritual benefit. There's benefit not only in this life, but in the hereafter. Right? Something which is good. If we do it, we are rewarded by God. We're rewarded by Allah. But if we don't do it, then we're not sinful. We're not blameworthy. It's a religious ruling. And there are matters, a lot of matters, that are both. But there are some that are one and not the other. And, and that's why we need to be able to differentiate between what we're talking about when we say something sunnah. So we say, look, is covering the head sunnah? Well, the Prophet ﷺ, we know, first definition, for sure. What his normal habit was, he would cover his head when he would go out in public. As a matter of fact, all of the, or most of the companions, that was the culture at that time. People covered their heads. That's what the norm was. But is it sunnah in terms of number 2, or according to the scholars of Islamic law? Can we ascribe some spiritual benefit to it? Can we say, yes, you're a better Muslim because you cover your head in public? Yes or no? In order for us to say yes, we would need some evidence. We would need something somewhere in the Sharia, something from the Quran or Sunnah to say, look, here's what the Prophet says, cover your head. Here's where he tells the companions, cover your head. Here's something to tell us. And does that happen? Yes or no? Do we have evidences, or an evidence, or a single evidence where the Prophet encouraged us or men to cover their head in public? Or while praying? We'll find out, inshallah ta'ala, on Sunday. Inshallah ta'ala. Wearing a ring, wearing a pinky ring, for example. Is it sunnah as in number 1? Did the Prophet wear a ring? Yes or no? Yes, he wore a ring. Is it sunnah in terms of number 2? Is there a reward in wearing a ring? We're talking about men here, by the way. Yes or no? We'll talk about this on Sunday, inshallah ta'ala. A beard. For a guy to grow a beard. Is it sunnah in terms of number 1? No. For sure, the Prophet ﷺ, it was part of his attribute. The Prophet ﷺ had a beard. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ had a large beard. The companions would say that we could tell from the back when he is reciting or his mouth is moving because we could see the beard from the back. We could see the beard moving. He had a large beard. It's known. So yes, it is sunnah in terms of it is from the attributes of the Prophet ﷺ. But is it sunnah in terms of a legal ruling? Is it something which is recommended? Is it something which is optional? We'll find out on Sunday, inshallah ta'ala. Long hair for men. Is that sunnah? To grow your hair long, up to your shoulders, or somewhere to have long flowing hair. Is that sunnah? In terms of the first definition, yes, it's sunnah. The hair of the Prophet ﷺ, by the way, we're going to talk about the hair of the Prophet ﷺ in detail, and the companions and the common styles at that time. And I think some of you will be surprised to hear about some of the styles that the companions had, by the way. Not everyone, some of you may know, but I find oftentimes people are like almost in disbelief. I had a brother come to me and be like, show me where it says that. Where did you find that hadith? And I'm like, okay, calm down, right? I know you're not used to it. I know it seems strange and foreign to you, right? But this is an authentic hadith. Anyway, yes, the Prophet had long hair, normally between his earlobes and his shoulders. At times it went past his shoulders as well. But is it sunnah in terms of it's something which is recommended and liked from a religious point of view? Yes or no? We'll find out, inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala. All right, what about dressing as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam dressed? Is there any extra reward in us wearing clothes or the style of clothes that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wore? No. We'll find out, inshallah ta'ala. All right, before I let you go for tonight, I promised you that I would tell you why this seminar is important to me on a personal level. And I spoke about, those of you who weren't here, in the beginning of tonight's session or tonight's event, I spoke about if I teach a seminar with Maghrib, if I'm going to spend 2 days or 2.5 days talking about a topic, going from city to city across America and across the world actually, if I'm going to talk about a topic like that, then it has to fulfill 2 conditions for me. Number 1, I said it has to be something which is applicable in our lives like right now, immediately. It has to be relevant to us. It has to be something that we can put into practice, something that we can find useful, something that, is practical, like I said, on a daily, on a, everyday basis. And I said, this is one of the things which is extremely applicable because we all wear clothes, or we don't, and we're just going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about both. So it is definitely applicable to everyone here, every single person, all the time, because we're always either, as I said, wearing clothes or not wearing clothes, and all of that relates to this. But second of all, I said I have to be passionate about the subject. And so this is this is a topic that I, as a personal relation, like I have a personal relationship with because of like the journey that I went through. And I'm going to share with you some personal stuff from my life, inshallah ta'ala. The only thing I request of you is that, and this is for the students who are here this weekend as well, I just request of everyone that if I share any details from my life, my personal life, I ask that you don't share that with people outside of the seminar. But anything else, knowledge, Quran, Hadith, whatever, like please, actually, not only do I, don't have a problem with you sharing, I encourage you to share it. But it just has certain personal details from my life. I feel comfortable sharing it in an Maghrib environment because we have all of your email addresses and your contact information. No, I'm just kidding. The reason why I feel comfortable sharing it is because there's context. And we're spending like 2.5 days together. And, context makes a very big difference. And so I'm comfortable sharing certain things with people who actually attend the seminar and we take this journey together that I'm not comfortable sharing outside. But for tonight, I'm just going to share one thing, inshallah, and that is when I started practicing Islam, and actually those of you who know like my story, you know that I consider myself as someone who accepted Islam. Even though my parents were Muslim, my family is Muslim, but growing up, we didn't really practice Islam, and I would say it was a cultural version of Islam, right? So Islam was just a part of the culture, and that's about it. Around college time, I was a sophomore in college where I actually consciously made the decision to practice Islam. I actually took my shahada and submitted properly. But at that time, I remember specifically like the type of lifestyle that I lived. It was very convenient to look at everything, especially fiqh, especially like Islamic rulings and these matters, as black and white. Everything is just clearly haram or clearly halal. And if you're not doing what Allah has commanded, then you're just, you're not a good enough Muslim. You're not fulfilling your obligations. It's because, number one, I knew very little. And, it was kind of like, and those of you who've been through this journey, I'm sure you can relate. When you first start practicing Islam or you first accept Islam, you have like this iman, you're like flooded with iman, right? And you can do things that are, like if someone says, do something, and even though it may normally be something very, very difficult on you, like it's no problem because you're like, you just went from like kufr to iman, from disbelief to belief, and your soul finally like clicked in line with your fitrah, with your nature, with how God has created us. And so, there's just a lot that, someone says, do this, and you're like, okay, don't do that. You're like, fine. I remember, subhanAllah, that I started studying Islam, and, I started with attending full-time Arabic classes at an institute in Virginia. And I remember walking into class one day, and I was wearing a pair of jeans, and one of the brothers in the class, he taps me on the shoulder. He goes, hey man, what's up with your jeans? I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, haven't you heard the Prophet ﷺ say, that which is below the ankles is in the hellfire? And I'm like, no, I haven't heard that. He goes, yeah, Aki, like, that's true. What's below the ankles, Prophet ﷺ told us, was below the ankles in the hellfire. So you can't be wearing pants like that. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, okay, thank you. After class, I went to the front office. I'm like, hey, do you have some scissors? He said, yes. I said, okay, awesome. I took the scissors, snip, 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 cut my jeans. This, by the way, is before hipster culture, right? So, cut my jeans, like, no problem. I go home, and I'm like, Mom, did you know that which is below the ankles in the hellfire? And I was like, no, I didn't. I'm like, Mom, we gotta, like, all my jeans, all my pants, like, we gotta take care of them. And Mom's like, yeah, it's gonna take a long time to, like, sew, to hem them and this and that. I'm like, that's fine, I'll just cut them. And I think I cut, like, a dozen pair of pants. It's like, and it was no problem, right? It was no problem. I remember I used to roll up into, I went to art school, majored in design. And I used to roll up to class in a thobe, right? I mean, people are kind of weird in art school anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But still, I remember like one day somebody in class was like, hey man, like no offense, I'm not trying to offend you or anything, I'm just curious. He's like, why are you wearing a dress? And I'm like, what do you mean? This is not a dress. This is whatever. Because I was told that that's how the Prophet dressed, right? He wore a thobe, which we're going to talk about, what he wore actually. And that's, and that's the life that I live. It's very cut and dry, black and white. I remember walking up to my brother one day and saying to him, hey man, when are you going to stop committing major sins? He's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you obviously trim your beard, and you know that Islamically it's not permissible for us to trim our beard. Someone had told me that, as a Muslim man, you cannot take from your beard, right? That's an opinion, by the way. We'll talk about the opinions regarding the beard. But he said, it's haram to touch your beard. Apart from the mustache, like you can't touch it. Let it grow. Let the beards grow. And I'm like, some scholars consider it a major sin. I was like, that's what I was told. So I'm like, hey man, stop committing major sins. He's like, what are you talking about? And I remember we had like a proper argument, right? And I know it's because I cared about him. I didn't want him to do something wrong. And, and this is not to, by the way, to judge anyone's intentions. Inshallah, people who behave like that or act like that, their intentions are good. They're practicing Islam. They want to practice Islam the proper way, the correct way. And they want that for others as well, right? Especially when you live a life upon disbelief. You spent your whole life, and then you're finally like, you find the light, and you're like, I want other people to do this as well. Why aren't you listening? Like, how do you not see it? So it comes, inshallah ta'ala, it comes from a good place. But that's how, that's how it was, very cut and dry for me. And I had no problem walking into people and be like, yo, that's haram. Fear Allah. Stop committing, make tawbah. Bro, you need to make tawbah. This is wrong, etc., etc. And I remember applying, I started applying to the University of Medina. And I got into the University of Medina. And there people came up to me and they were like, I don't know if it's a good idea for you to go to Medina. Because Medina used to have this reputation, maybe it still does kind of, but it used to have this reputation that, people become really strict when they go to Medina, right? When they go study Islam there, they become really harsh and they have, bad character and this and that, whatever. And they're like, look, man, like you definitely should not go to Medina. Because you haven't even gone to Medina and you're walking up to people and telling them like they're committing major sins, right? And I remember, like, I really thought about that issue. And I got accepted, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Should I go or should I not go? And I remember speaking to some of my teachers, amongst them Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif, amongst them Sheikh Yasser al-Qadi. And I remember, by consensus, all of them, they told me, they said, look, the only way that you're going to find balance and that you're going to find what is Islamically correct is by learning. So, yeah, you may go through a phase where you become harsh and maybe more harsh, but if you are sincere, if you're sincere in seeking knowledge, if you're doing it for the sake of Allah, then Allah will not leave you like that. Allah will guide you towards that which is pleasing to Allah and that which is correct. And so I decided to go to Medina, and I remember for the first year, 2 years, I did I was in the Arabic program. We studied, a little bit of fiqh here and there, and so I did become very strict. And then I got into the faculty of Sharia, the faculty of Islamic law. And you start studying comparative fiqh. You study different opinions. And you study opinions that you didn't even know existed. You study opinions you thought were completely wrong. I remember sitting down with a senior student and talking about a couple issues, and he's telling me different, I'm like, no, that cannot be true. He goes, no, it's a valid, and he goes, this is the opinion of the majority of the scholars. I'm like, how dare you? I'm like, stop lying. Like, that cannot be true. Turns out after studying, that was true, right? And I remember going through that journey myself. And I remember even the way I used to dress and the way I used to look. I went from really caring about the way I dress, pre-Islam and all of that, and to coming to a point where I'm like, none of this matters. It doesn't matter how you look. It doesn't matter what you wear. My pants look weird or I look weird. Who cares? Right? It's all about, being in this world as you're a traveler, and none of this stuff matters. And that's how people knew me before I went to Medina, and even my first couple years in Medina and so on and so forth. And I remember, being in the faculty of Sharia, I had this one, aha moment. I think it was my second year in Sharia. I was sitting in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and, sitting, leaning on a pillar, and this old guy came next to me and he started praying. And by the way he was dressed and all that, I could tell he's probably Pakistani, probably, maybe from one of the villages in Pakistan and so on. So, old guy, he's praying. And the first thing I realized is, I'm like, this dude is praying way too fast. Super fast. And I'm like, that can't be, like, that's not okay. And then I'm like, wait a minute, is he even reciting Surah Al-Fatiha? Because Surah Al-Fatiha is a requirement of your prayer. Your prayer is not valid without Surah Al-Fatiha, according to 3 of the 4 madhahib. That if your Fatiha is not recited, then your prayer is not valid. Right? 3 of the 4 madhahib say that. And I'm like, is this dude even reciting Fatiha? And so I decided to time him. How did I time him? I started reciting with him. So he got up, said, Allahu Akbar. I'm like, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Boom, he's in ruku'. I'm like, what? And then I'm like, okay, faster. And so next time, I'm like, Alhamdulillah, boom, he's already in ruku'. I'm like, no way, there's no way. I'm like, that was super fast. I didn't even know what I was saying pretty much. And still I didn't finish Fatiha, and he went to ruku'. And I'm like, now I know he's not. For sure, he's not studying Surah Al-Fatiha. And instinctively, I was about to be like, okay, I got to tell him. I could be like, yo, man, your prayer's incorrect. You got to at least recite Fatiha. You got to slow down. And then he kept praying, and he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed. And I remember, like, one of the things that really hit me is that he was praying fast, but he was praying a lot. And I was like, I don't remember the last time I prayed like that. Like, he just kept 2 rak'ahs and 2 rak'ahs and 2 rak'ahs and 2 rak'ahs, praying and praying and praying and praying and praying. And I sat there for a while. And finally, like, I felt like maybe he's like taking a break, and I had a chance to talk to him. And that whole time he was praying, I'm like going over the scenarios in my head. And I'm like, look, what's going to happen if I say to him, hey, listen, you got to recite Fatiha, you got to slow down, like your prayer's not valid, blah, blah, blah. I said, best case scenario. Okay, let's first go to worst case. Worst case scenario, he's like, who are you? Why are you talking to me? Who are you to tell me how to practice my religion? Why does your Urdu suck so bad? I don't even know what you're saying, right? My Urdu's okay. It's not bad. Pretty good, depending on who you ask. But it's okay. But he'd be like, who are you to tell me how to practice my deen? Right? I don't know you, like who? And he'd be like, get away from me. Best case scenario, I speak to him in Urdu, and he's like, oh, you're Pakistani, like, awesome, right? Yeah, oh, okay, you're a student in Medina, okay, you're studying Islam, okay, oh, thank you so much, I really appreciate, he says, I really appreciate, this is all, by the way, hypothetical, in my mind, this is how it's playing out. He says, hey, thank you, I really appreciate you telling me that I was doing this incorrectly. And I'm like, great. But what happens after that? What happens when he goes home and he has a follow-up question? What does he do? He's going to call me up? No, because I'm not going to give him my number, number one. Number two, there wasn't like any Facebook or anything. He's not going to look me up. I'm like, I'm never going to see this guy again. So forget about any follow-up. It's just never going to happen. And what happens when he goes to his local scholar? Well, his local scholar is probably Hanafi. And according to the Hanafi madhab, his prayer was actually valid. Right? According to the Hanafi madhab, even without Fatiha, even though it's strongly recommended, right, to recite Fatiha in the prayer, if a person doesn't recite it, the prayer is still valid. Right? And so his local scholar is Hanafi. And it's a one of two, like either he goes to him and says, hey, some guy told me this and that, and the guy's like, who are you listening to? What are you talking about? And now this guy has doubts in his imam. Or he gets upset at his imam, he loses faith in maybe scholarship, he loses faith in the sharia. He's like, oh, one guy's saying this, one guy's saying that, which happens all the time. And I'm like, that's not going to work out. And I'm like, if I really think about this issue, he's actually, what he's doing is correct. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ ذِكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Ask the people of remembrance, people who are close to Allah. Ask, if you don't know, ask. And so we can come on the Day of Judgment, inshaAllah ta'ala, I hope so. Inshallah, we can come on the Day of Judgment and say, I practice my religion like this because I asked somebody who is qualified, someone who is knowledgeable, and someone who I trusted. And because of that, I asked them, and that's what I've been commanded to do because I'm not a scholar, and I asked them, and this is what they told me, and that's what I did. And inshallah ta'ala, that's it. That's what we're required to do. We're not all required to be scholars. And so that's exactly what he's doing. He asked his imam, his scholar, and that's what they told him. And actually, that is a valid. I don't agree with that opinion, but that is a valid opinion. It is an accepted opinion, right? And there's valid khilaf and invalid khilaf, and I don't have time to get into that. But that's a proper opinion. And I remember the moment he finished praying, and I made the conscious decision to just sit back and be like, Assalamu alaikum. Right? Wa alaikum assalam. And he went his way, I went my way. And if you had asked me like 4 years ago if that's okay, I would have been like, no way. How can you not tell, like, you know the haqq, you know the truth, and you're not going to tell somebody who's obviously wrong? Like, and because of that, I myself went through like this journey as I studied and as I learned. And even till today, as I continue to learn and I continued, inshallah ta'ala, grow in my knowledge, my views and my opinions, and they've changed. And the way I've dressed has changed. And I've come to a point now in my life where, once again, for me, what matters the most is my relationship with Allah. Right? And that has brought me so much peace in life. Because it's, like I said earlier today, that, a lot of people are living like a guilty version of Islam. Right? They hear from here, they hear from there, this is wrong, right, whatever. So we always feel like, I'm just not good enough. Because so-and-so, said something and I don't even really know. Is this right or wrong, whatever? So we always feel like we're just always not good enough. Right? My hijab is not good enough. My beard is not good enough. My clothes are not good enough. Like, there's always, even if we're like, go and ask a scholar, something in the back of our mind that's like, maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're just a bad Muslim. And it has taken me this journey to get to a point, not to say that everything that I believe is correct, right? I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I don't have knowledge of everything, right? I'm learning myself as well. But it's taken me a long time to get to a place in my life where I feel comfortable in who I am. I feel comfortable in what I wear and how I present myself, and I feel like I can be true to myself. I remember graduating from Medina and starting with Maghrib. One of the things Maghrib really liked about me, they're like, oh, young, fresh instructor. My bio still says young and fresh, which I'm no longer young and fresh. But back then, like 6 years ago, they're like young, fresh instructor. They're like, he's into like extreme sports, and he's like, super. And I'm like, okay, I get that, you're trying to attract a younger crowd, but like that's not really me, right? As a matter of fact, like those who know me personally, I actually consider myself very much to be an introvert. I'm not much of a people person. For me, like the most enjoyable thing is like time by myself, right? And after I spend time around a lot of people, I need a break. I need time to myself. Like that's, to me, the most enjoyable thing. And I remember there was two sides pulling at me after I graduated. There's one side that was like, yeah, you got to be like this, this version of yourself that's like super outgoing and extreme sports and cool guy. Like also, I'm like, okay, calm down, number one. But on the other side, there's like, no, what are you doing? This is not what a student of knowledge looks like. This is not what a scholar or a sheikh looks like. Right? Wearing these type of clothes and this and that and doing this. Fiqh of chillin'. What scholar would ever teach a class? What sheikh would ever teach a class called fiqh of chillin'? And I remember very clear, I remember these two pulls at me. And I remember one of the pieces of advice that one of my teachers gave me before I left. He said to me, I asked him for advice, I just went up to all my teachers and I said, give me some advice before I leave. He said, be an open book. I'm like, cool. What does that mean? I didn't say that to him. I was like, oh, jazakallah khair. But I remember coming home and going through this, this pull from two directions, and I remembered his advice. And his advice was, be yourself. Right? Don't be fake. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. And I've come to learn that people can see through you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually people will be able to see if you're speaking from your heart or not. People will be able to see, is this who you are or you're putting on a front? And so it's taken me a while to come to a place where I'm like, look, I am who I am, and I understand, and I tell people I am not perfect. Don't model your life after me. I try, just like the rest of you are trying. All right? But for me, what's important is if I'm okay with Allah, if I know that what I'm doing is acceptable and okay with Allah, then inshallah ta'ala, like what you say, it's easier to brush it off. It's easier to be like, you know what? Be good with God. All right? And that's why like this seminar was so important to me. That's why when I really sat down and preparing the seminar, I really started talking about started looking into these issues, and I thought about all the young people that I've talked to and all the struggles that a lot of young people are going through. Not to say I have the answer to every single problem in this seminar, But this is my journey that inshallah ta'ala, I'm presenting to you. And that's why this seminar is important to me. And that's why it's one of the reasons that I'm teaching this seminar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I hope to see you all tomorrow, bright and early, super early, 10 a.m., right? Inshallah ta'ala. And yeah, that's it. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Don't leave. There's announcements.
We do have announcements.
Right.
We do definitely have announcements. All right, so I'm really high right now. I'm very, very high. I can literally see my mom's face. Like, what are you saying? I'm high on Iman. How many of you feel that right now? Yeah? Can I get some hands? Imagine the feeling that you're feeling right now amplified by 10. Tomorrow, inshallah, at House Important, my friend here, talk about logistics, where to be at. But for me right now, my 10-second pitch about Maghrib, it's all about the experience. If you felt that Iman rush right now, then inshallah, come out this weekend, register tonight, and inshallah, I'm going to see you. One more thing before we end. Al-Maghrib is an addiction. I'm telling you, once you take this pill, you are going to be addicted. That's all I'm going to say, inshallah. Go ahead and give us some love. Assalamu alaikum. So class tomorrow is going to be in room 1406. And it's going to start sharply at 10 a.m. Parents, if you're wondering which lot to drop your kids off, lot F is the closest lot to the classroom. So see you guys tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.